Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So we will be talking about GSM in today's lecture. But before we proceed to GSM, just a quick introduction of the history of wireless communication till the GSM. So we'll be talking about GSM, but only before we talk about some history of that and till the evolving GSM, right? So obviously GSM is not the latest technology, so the history would be covered only till the GSM, right? So in 1896, Marconi was the one who first demonstrated the wireless telegraphy. So he transmitted radio waves to a ship at sea 29 kilometers away. So please note that that is back in 1896. So there was a high power requirement at that time. More than 200 kilowatt was used. In 1901, Marconi again used telegraph across the Atlantic Ocean. So that was close to 3,000 kilometer hop. So those of you who don't know what the telegraph is, that is an apparatus for communication at a distance by coded signals, especially an apparatus system or process for communication at a distance by electric transmission over wire. So in 1907, there was commercial transatlantic connections, right? And in 1915, there was wireless telephony was established from New York to San Francisco and from Virginia to Paris. And in year 1920, again, it was Marconi who discovered the short waves with a wavelength of less than 100 meter. And he showed reflection at the ionosphere. And it was a cheaper, smaller sender and receiver possible due to the invention of the vacuum tube was already invented by that time. So he made use of that. Shortwave is basically a radio wave of a wavelength between 10 and 100 meter. That is a frequency of about 3 to 30 megahertz. So in 1920s, radio broadcasting became popular. In 1928, there were many TV broadcast trials were going on around the world. In 1930s, the TV broadcasting deployment was officially started. In 1946, there was first mobile telephone service in United States. So in 1960s, the Bell Labs developed the cellular concept, the concept of a cell that is capable of communicating with another cell and so on and so forth. And in 1960s, there were communications satellites were launched, right? So in late 1970s, the technology advanced. It enabled the affordable cellular telephony that was not very much affordable back in 1960s, but as the time progressed, the corresponding telephony service was getting cheaper and therefore affordable for users. So in 1974 to 1978, the first field trial for cellular system was developed, and that was AMPS. The AMPS is basically Advanced Mobile Phone System, and that was an analog mobile phone system that was developed by the Bell Labs and officially introduced in the America on October 13, 1983. In Pakistan, that was introduced in 1990. So first generation mobile systems and the early deployment, the first system was NMT 450, that is Nordic mobile telephone. That was basically the Scandinavian standard and that was adopted in most of the Europe. The band was around 450 megahertz and in Sweden that was adopted in 1981. As far as Italy is concerned, in 1966, there were experiments at 160 megahertz, and eventually the technology got into the market in 1973, and the first Italian cellular system was deployed in 1985, and with the evolution of TACS, that is the Total Access Communication System in 1990. Okay, the first generation mobile systems 1980s, several competing standards in different countries. As I told us, Nordic mobile telephone, that was a Scandinavian standard. The TACS, the Total Access Communication, the UK standard, and few of Europe, Asia, Japan, that was also adopted that tax system. As I said earlier, the AMPS was basically the US standard. So simultaneously, you can see that in 1980s across Europe and the United States, there were different countries and they were trying different kinds of things, and that eventually were all falling into the framework or the under the umbrella of the first generation of the mobile system. The important thing is that the analog transmission was used at that time. And as far as analog transmission is concerned, basically the frequency modulation was being used. The NMT band was around 450 megahertz, and later on it adopted the 9 megahertz standard. The tax started from the 900 megahertz and eventually evolved to 1230 megahertz with the bidirection channels with a 25 kilohertz band as well. So as far as AMPS is concerned, that was 800 megahertz standard. Today, still in use in low technology countries and not yet completely dismissed in high tech countries. So obviously that technology is now sort of obsolete, but still in some countries that is being used mostly for academic purposes, that is being used in high tech countries. But as far as some low technology countries, that is still being used. Okay, next is the second generation of mobile systems. As far as second generation of mobile systems is concerned, the global system for mobile, that is the GSM, came into the market, and the amps were evolved to the digital amps by the United States, and the code deviant multiple access also got attention, and the Qualcomm, the company based in United States, that is basically known as the pioneer of this CDMA systems. Personal digital cellular systems were also being used in Japan. The GSM by far the dominant one. GSM by far was the most dominant technology all across the world. Originally, that is known as the Pan-European standard, but that was deployed worldwide. That was only slow in the United States, obviously, because the amps got converted to the digital amp. So the GSM was not given that much of an attention as compared to the other countries. So the basic bands are 900 megahertz and 1800 megahertz and 1900 megahertz in few of the countries. And there were specifications for GSM 400 and GSM 800. GSM 800 was used in North America and GSM 400 in many other countries. Okay, so timing, 1982, the start of GSM specification in Europe. As I said that basically the GSM is sort of the pan-European technology to begin with. And in 1983, the start of American AMPS widespread deployment was being done. In 1984, there was CT1 standard Europe for cordless telephones. And in 1991, there were digital European cordless telephone. You also are well aware of this cordless telecommunication. 100 to 500 meter range, 120 duplex channels, 1.2 megabits per second of data transmission with voice encryption and authentication. So things were getting evolved, right? So in 1992, the start of GSM operation all across Europe was done in 1992, and the advanced variant of GSM, that is a DCS 1800, that is also mentioned over here, DCS 1800, that got into action in 1994. Okay, the next thing is 2.5 generation mobile system, the GSM incremental extension. So that is also sometimes known as 2.5, right? So high-speed circuit switch data network was with the circuit switch data communication that used around 4 slots with a one slot of 14.4 kbps. And I'm not sure if most of you are well aware of this GPRS, because initially the GSM came, but then that GSM got upgraded to 2.5G when basically the GPRS service was incorporated into GSM. So usually when we talk about GSM, you sometimes say that that was a 2G technology, But GSM incorporated with GPRS, that is usually a sort of a term that is used for 2.5 G systems. That is a GSM having the capability of GPRS. It used packet data and up to 115 kbps of data rate. And after that, it evolved to edge, the enhanced data rate for global evolution. I believe most of you, when you get to some kind of place that is has some connectivity issue. So if you're not getting the 4G, so you usually get 3G. And even if the 3G is not coming, either you get edge, and sometimes it is showing you G on your mobile phones, and sometimes you see that E written on the top right of your mobile phone. That is basically the edge, right? So that is edge basically stands for enhanced data rates for global evolution. So at the time of its evolution, that was considered a very high technology, but these days, obviously, that is obsolete. High data rate available of 384 kbps. And thanks to the new modulation scheme, may coexist with the old GMSK. The Gaussian minimum shift keying that was upgraded to the phase shift keying, that is the digital modulation techniques. Then third generation of mobile systems used universal mobile telecommunication system, that was the ITU standard IMT 2000. UMTS forum created in 1996, later on 3GPP forums. I will talk about some of these things in my lecture that would be related to the evolution from 1G to beyond 2G, 3G, and 4G. So most of the details related to this evolution would be covered over there. Okay, so some of the few old data, let me just quickly skim that. USA, over 50% of the US households have cellular telephone. That is again based on data that was recorded in year 2005-6, right? So obviously that data is not an updated data, but since we are covering the topic of GSM, so I wanted to just go through these stats as well, right? So these are few of the stats, few of the revenues as well. But again, as I said, I will cover this in the topic, the evolution of the different generations, right? Okay, so coming to the GSM network. So at least you are now clear that the GSM is sort of a 2G, 2.5G, and then that was also 2.7G, 2.75G. So basically the second generation and its variants are basically fall under this topic of GSM network. So as far as GSM network is concerned, this is basically the high level view of that. In this middle cloud, you are seeing that PSTN. PSTN is basically public switch telephone network. We have already covered this topic of PSTN, right? It's sort of your telephone system, or the PTCL telephone that you use at your home. That is basically the PSTN network, right? So that is basically the PSTN network's cloud. And the bigger gray cloud is basically of the public land mobile network. So public land mobile network is short for is a generic term for mobile wireless network that is centrally operated and administered by an organization and uses land-based radio frequency transmitters or base stations as a network hub. So everything that is under this cloud is basically one network that you use. For example, you use a network of, for example, company Jazz, right? Jazz or the Varit Telecom, right? So that basically is the public land mobile network. So this cloud comes under that. So you can see that under this, you have some or few MSCs. MSCs are basically the mobile switching centers. That is also known as the administrative region of that. And then you have some other base stations. So basically, for example, consider yourself in this car. So when you are in this car, you are under the operating region of this system. This is basically the base station. So, for example, you guys are looking at this lecture and trying to understand this lecture. Obviously, every one of you are sitting at some location, right? Some geographical location, and using some public land mobile network. So obviously you are over here, right? So you are under the influence or under the operating region of this cell, right? And this cell is basically created by some base station, right? So you are under the influence of some base stations, and number of base stations are connected to one MSC, and number of MSCs are connected to uh, some, for example, public switch telephone network, right? So whenever you want to communicate, you are obviously you're supposed to go through a certain chain of network, and eventually you reach that and connect to that, right? So we will be talking about these base stations, MSCs, in a little while. Over here, you see that uh, this is an MSC region. So keep this thing in your mind, keep this thing in your mind, that you are, first of all, you are under some cell, that is the cell created by a base station. And number of base stations are connected to MSCs, and number of MSCs are within some public land mobile network. So when you go out of this cloud, this light blue sort of a cloud, that is some other network. For example, that is a public switch telephone network. So you are supposed to go out of this gray cloud. So eventually you have to pass through some MSC, right? Okay. Now coming to this MSC region, as you've just seen, that MSCs are connected to base stations, right? So that base station is basically, if we look into this in more detail, MSC is the mobile switching center. This BSC basically is the base station controller, and BTS is the base transceiver station, right? So you are here. Please focus on the cursor of the cursor, right over here, this BTS. So if you are over here, you are under the influence or under the operating region of some BTS. BTS is base transceiver station, and number of BTSs are connected to some base station controller. So let me tell you this thing again. You are over here, for example, right? So you are connected to a certain base transceiver station. This is the BTS, right? So in Urdu, for example, you often say that there is a भाई खंबा लगा हुआ है किसी कंपनी का जहाज का, ठीक है? ठीक है, तो this is basically is what that basically is the correct terminology is the BTS. You are connected to some BTS. For example, there are many BTSs connected. If you just look out right now, I'm on the sixth floor, right? So if I just look out and just move around and look out in different directions, I will see a number of BTSs of different companies, right? So obviously the telephone that I'm using is that of, I'm using the network of Jazz Varid. So obviously I am under the operating region of some BTS, right? And there would be number of BTSs around me, right? But I am under the influence of some BTS, and that has a certain geographical area. When the geographical area of that BTS is completed, if I move out to some direction, obviously I will come into the operating region of some other BTS. So as I said, that number of BTSs are connected to a BSC, right? So that is all under the MSC. So in the hierarchy, when you are in some MSC region, as you see over here, so MSC region means there are n location areas, and that means there are number of, for example, MBSCs, and each BSC has some K BTSs, right? So you are under the influence of some MSC. For example, I must be connected to some MSC. I don't know where that MSC is right now, but obviously I will be connected to some MSC, but not directly. Eventually my BTS is connected to some BSC, and that BSC is connected to the MSC, right? Okay. Moving further, we're going to see some essential components of GSM. So, as I said that this is MS, which is also known as the mobile station, and that mobile station is under the operating region of some BTS, that is the base transceiver station, and number of BTSs are connected to some BSC, and number of BSCs are connected to some MSC, right? And MSC has few components. One of them is EIR, right? That is the equipment identity register. Then I have AUC, which is authentication center. Then I have HLR, that is a home location register, and then VLR, which is the visitor location register. And then my MSC is also connected to OMC. So OMC is basically the operation and maintenance center that is connected to all equipment in the switching system and to the BSC. The implementation of OMC is called the Operation and Support System, also known as OSS. And after the MSC, you're looking at some other block, that is the GMSC. This is very important. The GMSC is the Gateway Mobile Switching Center. That is a type of MSC that is used to route calls outside the mobile network. So if I am supposed to make a call and that call is outside the mobile network of that, so obviously my call would be routed from BTS, from BTS to some BSC, from BSC to some MSC, some processing around these blocks, and eventually to the GMSC, and from GMSC it will go out to, for example, some other PSTN network or some other kind of network that that can be any other network, right? Okay. Okay. So as I said that you have GMSC, and then before that GSME we have MSC, and that MSC has OMC, that has OSS that I talked about earlier. So OSS, an operational support system, is a set of programs that helps a communication service provider monitor, control, analyze, and manage a telephone or a computer network. So it is a key component of any GSM network, right? So two components are there. One is the fixed installed infrastructure, the network in the proper sense. And then we have mobile subscribers, also known as mobile station. The fixed infrastructure divided into three subsystems. One is the BSS, the base station subsystem. It manages the transmission path from mobile station to the NSS, right? And NSS is the network switching subsystem, that is the communication and interconnection with other networks. And OSS is GSM network administration tools are basically operated by this OSS system. So you are over here, users are over here, mobile station, and then mobile station to BSS. This interface is also known as radio interface. So why we are naming these interfaces? For example, there would be few engineers that would be looking at interfaces. So their concern would be only be to look out the issues that are that is happening between mobile station to the BSS, right? And then we have BSS to NSS. This interface is known as the A interface, right? So obviously there would be engineers that would be looking at issues that are in the A interface, right? So from base station to the NSS, and from NSS, you can see the two-way connectivity to OSS. And similarly, from OSS, we have a two-way connectivity to the BSS. Why? Because OSS is the operational subsystem, and it is sort of an administrator that is looking at NSS and BSS, and BSS and NSS obviously both are related to each other. So obviously if you are supposed to make a call to some external network, so obviously your call would be routed from MS, from BSS. Obviously that includes the BTS and the BSC. All these things are over here, right? And as you just saw that MSC had OMC and OMC had OSS. So that OSS part is basically in the MSC, right? And from NSS, you have a two-way switch to the external network. So obviously that beyond this GMSC, you would be going to the other network, right? So these are the GSM subsystems that again are very important. Okay, next thing is few important details related to the mobile station.